Hello Wastelanders. Don't know what time it is where you are, but where I am down here in the bunker, it is hatch mail time. Today we will just go through some of the letters that some of you have sent me before I created the show to answer some of your therapy questions. And if you yourself have any questions you'd like answered, then I implore you to go in the comments and send it to us, or if you want privately, just to email it or send it to us at right there. There it is again. Okay, so send everything into that address and we'll get onto your question. Okay, this one, and I think for this segment we'll just use the first initial followed by surname Wastelander. That way we keep everything anonymous and people's questions safe. So if you can handle that, let's go ahead. Here we go. M. Wastelander says, sorry, I forgot how to read for a second. M. Wastelander says, okay, at what point do I know that I should need therapy? My partner says that I need therapy, but I myself am not so sure. Well, thanks, M. Wastelander, and let me answer that for you. And so in therapy, we kind of have this understanding that, you know, if you are experiencing distress from your symptoms personally, or those around you, say your loved ones, have kind of, you know, just, if your loved ones, and I would say it probably takes more than one. Now, if they kind of say to you as, I don't know, a family unit, you know, we are experiencing distress from your symptoms, it could be that, you know, it doesn't mean to say that you are causing the direct distress. For example, they just might be worried that you're exhibiting signs of, say, depression or anxiety. That is quite common, actually. Other times you might have, say, someone who's, let's go with the more common, you know, stereotype where, say, someone has a psychotic episode and it leads to workmates or family members feeling distress for that individual, and at that time sometimes people will present into therapy and you know, we run over some tests with them and find out what they might be exhibiting and then talk to them, of course. I do want to say that there's one caveat though. I would say the caveat is that, you know, most of the time we're not talking about, like, say, a partner saying, for example, that, you know, they think you need therapy. Plenty of partners have said that to their other partners in the course of history. But what we're looking for is kind of like ongoing distress in the family unit. You know, kids are upset, partners upset, mom and dad are upset, sister or brother are upset. You know, you want to have kind of like a full overview of the family, kind of looking into it, and more than just, say, a partner, boyfriend or girlfriend kind of saying, oh, I think you need therapy. For that reason, I would say the best example of knowing if you need therapy is knowing about your own distress level with your symptoms. Of course, some people end up not really showing signs of any distress with their symptoms, but most of the time in therapy we'll have people who self-present more often than not. A lot of the times we can get referrals, but that tends to usually be for specialist therapies. This is not the case all the time. So if you're feeling that you are feeling distress from your symptoms and you'd like to talk to somebody, that would be the best time to come into therapy and talk to somebody. Right, well, I hope that answers your question, M. Wastelander. On to the second one. Okay, this one's pretty deep, and I'm really thankful for this. This comes from B. Wastelander, and B. Wastelander says, hey dog, as per your post, memory is inherently flawed, and each time the retelling of a significant or problematic life event, trauma, situation, or experience changes our perception, and therefore our memory of the initial instance. Is there then a point which our memory becomes significantly different from the initial event that becomes a trauma of its very own? Now that is a piping hot radioactive question, B, and I would like to answer it by saying, short answer is hell yes. longer answer is it often does actually. Yeah. So just getting into that now. So a memory, right, it's not really a static fault. It's more like a wasteland radio signal, distorted, patchy, sometimes fading in and out. Every time we recall an experience, especially say a traumatic one, we're not just replaying the original, we're kind of editing it. Memory is reconstructive, not really that reproductive. The storyteller in our head is also the editor, the sound guy, and the lighting crew, and sometimes the saboteur. Now, to your core question, when we revisit a painful memory repeatedly, whether in therapy, flashbacks, rumination, or telling stories to others, it can change shape. Sometimes that retelling clarifies and heals like a slow brushing of the ash of, say, a buried relic, but other times we warp it. We reinforce certain details, amplify guilt or shame. We can erase the context or even fill in the blanks with imagined blamed, which is pretty horrific. Over time, that memory kind of morphs into something heavier, meaner, more radioactive than the event of itself, you know, a ghost made of echoes, if you will. So yeah, our memory can become a trauma of its own, a second generation trauma. One just not from what happened, but from how you've come to live with it. Here's the kicker though, just like trauma can evolve, so can healing. So if we pardon me, here we go again. So like I was saying, just like trauma can evolve, so can healing. So what kind of happens in that regard is that we can, you know, reconstruct the memory into something more painful. We can also reprocess it into something redemptive. And that's what therapy is for. That's what storytelling, community, art, and even good old bunker broadcasts are for. That's not a crazy thought, by the way. You're noticing it, so that's excellent, very wise. And your awareness there, be Wastelander, is already part of your healing. And transmission, next letter please. Jay Wastelander writes here. They want to know what kind of main therapies that I provide. Didn't really build this channel to talk about my therapies per se, but I will just give you a quick overview. So kind of my favorite Jay Wastelander is what we call, let's try this finger, ready? Bang, solution circus therapy. Followed by that, I like kind of more existential type therapy, and then following from that, probably kind of a mix of in-depth working of what they call the trans-theoretical model, and that is usually for help with behavior change, less habit changing. Well, that is behavior change, so I'm not going to bother with explaining that. That's just more kind of helping people relate to the stages of change you may know under that model. Mostly I'm working with those three in the usual kind of client settings. I tend to like the therapies that give power back to wastelanders and not take away from them. You know, in the wasteland we've kind of had enough power taken from us. So I like to leave kind of like more power in my clients and give them kind of assets and strengths to build on while exploring options that they come up with. Yeah, therapy is not something that I tell you what to do. We kind of collaborate here in the wasteland and find out what works and what doesn't for people, and then try to find out, you know, how do we maximize what works and how do we minimize what doesn't work. It's a process and it takes some time, but usually it ends up pretty good. At least I like to think so. And lastly, but surely not leastly, we have F Wastelander here, and they write. F Wastelander writes, people say that doing therapy is a sign of weakness. What do I say to that? I would say, have you seen people who don't go to therapy after they know they have problems? I would say that is more weight, to be honest. Allowing yourself to stay kind of in a sick situation and not recover is kind of the motto of sick people. Now, you know, you can go through life with a broken leg, but you don't set it right, how it's going to heal properly. Same thing goes with the mind, I believe anyway. And you know, we're talking about lived experience here in the bunker. We've all been through the event. You know what I'm talking about. F Wastelander has also written here that they want to try therapy, but they tend to go for later hours, but they don't know if I do something like that. Personally, in my own private practice, now this isn't really a soundboard to get clients into that, but I will provide my contact details for my personal business. If you guys want, it'll be in the description. You can then apply to that if you want to. But I would say, yeah, after hours for myself, it depends on the therapist and the business model. Some therapists do 9 to 5, others like me are more online based, and we kind of do anything up to 2 o'clock in the morning, such as myself. But F Wastelander, that kind of depends on the therapist, and you know, you can normally see their business hours on their site, so it's all about picking which one works for you. And there are plenty out there, and you know, if any of you are looking for any help with that, you can always feel free to send us your mail and we'll answer some of those privately. Or if you want, you file the bunker hatch mail, you can do that too. F Wasteland has one more question there, and they ask, okay, so they say that they prefer to do a few sessions with their therapist before they open up, and they ask if that's normal, and I would say absolutely. There's not really a therapist who doesn't have their own therapist. It's kind of industry standard. You might think of that as a therapy pyramid here on the wasteland. I'm not going to tell you it's not. It is, however, super helpful for us, so I would say that even in my own experience as a therapist with a therapist, I took a while to open up to my therapist, and I would expect kind of the same for anybody who joins in. You are building a therapeutic relationship with a stranger, so you know, that takes a little getting used to, a little bit of bravery and a little courage. Get there in the end though if you try. Here in the wasteland, courage is 9/10 of the law after possession, right? Right. Well, I hope Wastelanders that was illuminating, and now we'll move on to our next segment. And join us while we discuss golden mysteries of paddling. I don't know what that is. Do you know what that is? I sure hope that our guest, the Quizmaster, knows what that is, because I'll be asking the questions that I don't even know the answers to. What do they do? No cheating, and that's coming up next.